I'm Hena Doba, and for Elizabeth Vargas, we have special coverage tonight of breaking news from Washington, D.C., where two National Guard members from West Virginia are in critical condition after being shot in a brazen act of violence on the streets of the nation's capital, just blocks from the White House. Confusion marked the minutes after the shooting, with the governor of West Virginia initially posting on social media that the two guardsmen had passed away from their injuries, only to backtrack in a post about 20 minutes later, saying there were conflicting reports on their conditions. Those reports were clarified in a press conference around 5 p.m. earlier. FBI Director Kash Patel said the Guard members were still alive and in critical condition. The alleged gunman was also shot and in custody at a local hospital, while Washington Metro Police gave details on what was described as a targeted shooting.
At approximately 2:15 this afternoon, members of the D.C. National Guard were on high visibility patrols in the area of 17th and I Street Northwest when a suspect came around the corner, raised his arm with a firearm, and discharged it at the National Guard members. The National Guard members, there were other members that were in the area. They were able to, after some back and forth, able to subdue the individual and bring him into custody.
Since this is an assault on a federal law enforcement officer, this will be treated at the federal level as an assault on a federal law enforcement officer. The FBI will lead out on that mission.
President Trump, who is in Palm Beach for Thanksgiving, posted on Truth Social that, quote, "The animal that shot the two National Guardsmen will pay a very steep price," end quote. While Vice President J.D. Vance addressed troops in Fort Campbell, Kentucky, asking for prayers for those guardsmen. Here's what he said.
First of all, I want everybody who's a person of faith to say a prayer for those two National Guardsmen, that they're able to spend Thanksgiving with their families instead of losing their lives, because I understand they're still in pretty tough condition.
U.S. Defense Secretary Hegseth says Trump has asked for 500 additional troops to be deployed to D.C. after this shooting. NewsNation's Hannah Brandt is also live at the scene. Hannah, good evening. I know you've been on the scene for hours now. You were able to talk to a few eyewitnesses. What did they tell you?
Yeah, Hannah, I mean, they described what was really some scary moments when these shots rang out earlier today. It happened right over my shoulder, right behind me here on 17th and I Street. For those not in the D.C. area, this is a pretty busy and bustling area just a couple of blocks away from the White House. It happened right near the metro stop here. And I talked to one man who was visiting from Georgia. He tells me he was just walking around this area when he heard the shots rang out. He immediately says he knew what it was. It was really scary moments, he said. Take a listen to what he told me about it.
I just heard two gunshots, and then 30 seconds later, 3 more came, and I just seen everybody running.
How did that feel?
It's scary when you first heard, when you kind of knew it was a gunshot.
It remains a very busy police scene here tonight. Streets still blocked off all around where the shooting took place. We were told by FBI Director Kash Patel earlier that this would be the full force of the federal government and the local government here to investigate, several agencies on the ground as they try and figure out how this shooting happened. Hannah?
Hannah Brandt, yes, certainly a lot of activity behind you. Thank you. For more, let's go to Chris Swecker, former Assistant Director of the FBI and a former Secret Service agent, Michael Matranga. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Michael, I will start with you. This is being described as a targeted ambush-style shooting. These troops were deployed to strengthen security in the Capitol. How does a gunman get so close to shoot uniformed guardsmen in one of the most heavily secured areas in the country in broad daylight?
Without being too technical, it's not too hard to walk down the street of America, any street in America, any community, and attack someone who's not necessarily looking for that attack or prepared for that. And so, I think it causes the question of, are the National Guardsmen the appropriate entity to be patrolling the streets of America? And I'm not, being political here or not. I think that if, in any city in America, that crime is ridden and we need to utilize assets that we have and the National Guard is available, I would say that let's lean on them, but let's make sure that they're prepared to fulfill a law enforcement patrol mission. This is the 5th time in the last 2 years that I can recall commenting with you guys on this particular show, dating back to the terrorist attack in New Orleans, followed by the Trump explosion, followed by the Trump assassination attempt in July, and then followed in September. And the same pattern has occurred. And that's the fact is that we have a political violence problem in America. Every time these things happen, we hear individuals like Vice President Vance getting up and immediately talking about thoughts and prayers. And what I would say to these political leaders that are leading our nation is that they should perhaps pray that God helps them keep their tongue in check so that we don't continue to have these individuals who are unstable that want to attack our service members.
I'm glad you mentioned that. We will be talking about political rhetoric later in the show with some lawmakers, but that's a point so many people are bringing up. I do want to bring up some breaking news that's just coming into the newsroom. We are learning that the shooter may be an Afghan national. NewsNation is working to confirm that. Chris, does this change anything?
Well, it adds a new dimension to it, of course, with the Afghan withdrawal and the sort of the willy-nilly vetting that was done to allow many of the Afghans into this country. Not to downgrade those that served alongside our soldiers in Afghanistan, but the screening was less than rigorous, shall we say. So it brings in potential terrorism element as well when you have a foreign, someone from another country like Afghanistan, which is a hotbed for terrorism and terrorist activities and terrorist organizations, here assaulting a federal law enforcement, ambushing a federal law enforcement officer. So that puts the idea of an international terrorism aspect on the table here. And that's something, there are no specific charges for international terrorism. There are specific charges for international terrorism, and those are pretty strict. I mean, you're going to see some serious time if this guy pulls through.
Chris, let me stick with you. The suspect is not cooperating with investigators. He has no ID. We still don't know the motive. What will the investigation look like moving forward when it comes to the FBI? And this is a multi-agency investigation. Who leads it?
Right. I mean, Kash Patel said there, FBI is in the lead. I would not have guessed that. I would have guessed that they would have put D.C. police in the lead to begin with and walked alongside them and offered all the resources that they have available. But be that as it may, the FBI has a lot. They can dig into the social media, of course. That's what they always do. They're going to look into his electronic media. How did he get there? Is there anything in the car that they can exploit? Anything in his pockets? Does he have a social media presence online? All the things that we've been seeing with all the mass shooters throughout the last 8-10 years. And of course, there's a lot of technology around video and video retrieval and video review, speed review going on. So there's a lot going on here. I think his motivation is probably already very clear to the investigators.
Michael, Secretary of War Hegseth says they have requested 500 more troops to D.C. I know the president filed an emergency motion just a little while ago. Tell me more about the heightened security and what will it look like in our nation's capital going into the holiday season and beyond?
I think, there's been a lot of debate online whether the troops should be there. Again, politics is causing that division. And for those that thought, or if this individual or group perhaps he's working with thought that this would be something that would prevent that from happening, I think what they've done is they've just thrown gas on that fire. I fully expected to see the Secretary of War increase the number of National Guard troops as well as the president. And so, I truly hope that for anybody out there that thinks that they can attack men and women of service, whether it be our local, state, and federal law enforcement officers or any service members, I really hope that the president and the Secretary of War and all of those entities that are investigating this come down with the full force.
Chris, you were talking about potential charges. The FBI director says this will be treated as an assault on federal officers as of now. Break down what that means.
Yeah, well, I'm going to have the premise that this officer or this National Guard soldier was sworn in or deputized as a law enforcement officer under control of the state or the D.C. government. So that allows them to be deputized under the D.C. The police department there. You know, there are assault on a federal officer carries a pretty steep penalty. I think it's 10 years. So, you know, that's aside from any terrorism charges here. If there is some terrorism aspect to it and he used a firearm in an act of terrorism, I think that takes it up to 20 years. So if he survives, he's looking at some pretty strict time.
The gunman opened fire on two National Guardsmen as they performed what's being described as high-visibility patrols. Michael, this happened in broad daylight during busy holiday travel. We know several shots were fired, again, just feet from the White House. What strikes you most about this ambush attack?
I think that what strikes me, not necessarily strikes me most, but confirms what I've been saying for a very long time and have been trying to tell the American people, is that we are living in a very volatile state in America. Politics is driving that. Religion is driving that. Personal beliefs, other personal beliefs are driving this division. And what I would tell Americans is that you need to be attentive, be aware of your surroundings, understand that some of these policies or the rhetoric that's coming out of Washington, D.C. or out of even your state house or even your local governments are not very well thought out. They're politically motivated, and you have to ask yourself, how does that impact me? How does that impact my neighbor? You know, I've said this time and time again, is that we've allowed politics to divide us at the local level. When we have a crisis in our communities, do you think anybody cares if you're a Republican or you're a Democrat? If I have a hurricane here along the Texas Gulf Coast, it's probably going to be my next door neighbor who is a Democrat who's going to come to my aid, and I, a registered Republican, to his or her aid. So what I would tell America and Americans is that we have to come together as a people, and we have to start realizing that we have to take care of ourselves.
Yeah, and you guys brought this up early on in our conversation. We're having these conversations way too often. Chris, before I let you go, is DHS assessing this as a broader threat, or do you believe this is isolated from your perspective, from your experience?
I mean, from my perspective here, from everything we've seen over the last few hours, he does look like a lone actor, but maybe he was inspired by a terrorist site, social media site, or some indoctrination that took place in Afghanistan. But I think we would be hearing something about that if there were others out there. There are other co-conspirators out there. Right now, we're not, and I would say, you know, there's still a whole lot of investigation left to do, and they're going to hold a lot of it close to the vest at this point, because you don't need, if there are co-conspirators, you don't need them knowing what law enforcement is doing and whether they're closing in on them.
All right, Chris and Michael, really appreciate your time coming in, and just your analysis is really crucial tonight. We appreciate your time. And we're continuing to follow this breaking news. Two National Guardsmen in critical condition tonight after what the mayor of D.C. says was a targeted shooting. According to multiple reports, the suspected shooter is an Afghan national. NewsNation has not confirmed this. Our team is working on doing that as we speak. Let's go to NewsNation correspondent Kelly Meyer live at the scene. Kelly, you were at the White House. You were put on lockdown minutes after the shooting. You're on the scene now. What's the latest?
Yeah, and I want to tell you right off the top that we are just getting that confirmed. Senior law enforcement officials, as well as U.S. officials, both telling us that the suspect is an Afghan national and used a handgun. That is the information we are just getting into our newsroom and learning per a senior law enforcement official, as well as a U.S. official. We are learning that tonight. So we're still waiting for more details on the suspect, as well as the latest on those two National Guardsmen that were shot here today. But like you said, I was on 17th and Pennsylvania, just 2 blocks from where this happened. Right now, where we are is on 18th and I. So this happened on this very same street, just a block over, and you could still see the police activity there. That is where the shooting happened earlier today, around 2:15 p.m. Eastern. That's the same time that I was about 2 blocks down 17th and 17th in Pennsylvania. I walked out to return to the White House and couldn't move. There was police tape already up and police cars, as well as U.S. Secret Service cars, rushing up 17th Street to come up here to I Street and find out what was going on. And that time, we didn't know exactly what was happening, and we were reporting on NewsNation, getting more details coming in, and then finding out, of course, that 2 National Guardsmen were shot here today. They are still in critical condition, is what we're hearing tonight. We also heard in that press conference earlier today, Hena, that this was a targeted attack. That's what the D.C. mayor said. So this is something that the president has commented on, members of his cabinet have commented on, and this is something that we're watching very closely as we're getting that latest information in just now, confirmed to NewsNation, that the suspect, the shooter, is an Afghan national and had a handgun here today. Hena.
Kelly Meyer, I'm glad you're okay. A lot of scary moments for so many people. Kelly Meyer live in D.C. and just confirming what Kelly, our Washington correspondent, said. We can confirm the suspect is an Afghan national, and sources have told Kelly and the team he did use a handgun. Now, coming up, more on this horrific shooting in our nation's capital the day before Thanksgiving. Republican Congressman Mark Alford on his call for unity and healing. I'll talk to him next. Welcome back. While we don't know the motive of the suspect who shot and critically injured two National Guardsmen in D.C. today, we do know that online discourse is raging. Each political party blaming the other for every awful thing that happens in our country. But my next guest is calling for unity and healing. Republican Congressman Mark Alford of Missouri joined us in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination. He told us that the role of those in power after tragedy is to listen and learn.
I wanted to come and talk, and I wanted to listen. That's our job as representatives. I wanted to help in this healing process, to hear their concerns, their anxiety, but also to pray.
And Congressman Mark Alford joining us now. Congressman, thank you for coming on tonight.
Thank you, Hoda.
I want to get to what you said just there. Before that, though, I do want to ask you about the breaking news just coming into the newsroom that he was an Afghan national. What is your response to that?
Well, my response kind of ties into what I said previously after the Charlie Kirk assassination. I think it's very odd that we are somewhat relieved in America that this is not an assassination attempt on active military duty members protecting our most precious city, Washington, D.C., and instead it might be an Islamic terrorist. Now, what does that say about our nation, that we're relieved that it's not a result of the political rhetoric and political violence that has emanated the United States of America? It's sad that here we are on the eve of Thanksgiving, and two families in West Virginia are racing to the bedside of their loved ones in Washington, D.C., apparently because of an Afghan national. We'll wait and see what happens. In the meantime, we've got to do our job, as you were talking about, bringing the rhetoric down so we don't have other incidents. We don't have an attempted assassination again of the president, or another assassination of someone like Charlie Kirk.
Back to what you said previously on this show about unity and healing, it really stuck with a lot of us. It feels like we do need to focus on unifying, but instead, it's likely we're going to see a lot of finger pointing. It's only been a few hours. We're already seeing the discourse. It seems even more tragic, like you mentioned. This is happening the day before Thanksgiving when we're supposed to be sitting down with our families. As we take a look at this and you sit back and think about what played out tonight, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm kind of sick to my stomach, to tell you the truth. We were enjoying time with our family here. I was in Washington, D.C. last week. I was at the White House. We went out to dinner afterwards and ran into some National Guard members, and I gave them my business card and told them, if there's anything I can do, let me know. I really appreciate their service. I'm glad that President Trump is sending more National Guard troops into the District of Columbia to help protect the citizenry there and clean up the streets. It's been widely effective so far in the months that he's had the other National Guard members there. But it's sad that we've come to that point. And as we go back and work feverishly to try to get the 9 remaining appropriation bills done and avoid another government shutdown, which I think led to a lot of heated rhetoric on Capitol Hill, we've got to remember that we work for one person, and that is the constituent in our district who pays our bills through taxes and who deserves our respect and our action in Congress to actually get things done. I think if we saw more progress in getting things done in Congress, we could bring the heat down a little. But it's going to take, I think, both sides, and I'm not here to do whataboutisms. I'm not into that, but we've got to remember who we serve. Let's quit putting the focus on us, and let's put the focus on the American people.
How do we do that when we see so much finger pointing with our politicians? Do you think we can ever get to a situation where we can move past the name calling and truly, to your point, listen to what constituents are saying, to what lawmakers are saying?
It takes a little guts, I think, on both parts. I think we've become so factionalized now, the Republicans against the Democrats, and even within our parties, different factions against one another. We're working on that, I think, with good progress in our conference. I try to go every time that I'm on the House floor across and meet a new Democrat whom I don't know. We're not going to agree on everything, maybe not on anything, but we are in the same body. I think I'm honored to be there. I think everyone is honored to be there, and we've got to just keep our focus on, it's not about us. In politics, I've only been in politics for 3 years, and it's easy when everyone's calling you sir and making you coffee and doing this and that to get disillusioned about what this is all about. And my wife does a great job of keeping me in check when I come home. But we've got to remember, it's not about us, Hoda. It's about the American people. It's about our republic. And when President Trump talks about making America great again, I know a lot of people that kind of curls their toes. What I'm talking about is, let's make our country the best that we can be so that we can be that beacon of light, of hope, of democracy for other countries to look up to. We have lost our hope in America, and we've got to bring that back.
The incident, and I've said this many times on the show, it happened just a few blocks away from the White House. What message do you think it sends about the current state of security inside our Capitol? And more importantly, moving forward, how should Congress respond?
Well, it's a little bit scary. I do like seeing the National Guard on the streets when we go out to dinner after we're done working on Capitol Hill. To tell you the truth, I don't leave the Capitol Hill much anymore. I typically eat there. I sleep in my office. It's safer that way. It's more convenient. But when I do go out, I'm looking over my shoulder. This pin I have here, the congressional pin that designates that we're a member of Congress, I don't wear that out in public in D.C. Because I don't want the recognition as a sitting member of Congress. I'm glad we do have security. The Capitol Police are wonderful. I felt bad that they were not getting paid during the government shutdown. They protect us. The Sergeant at Arms does a wonderful job, and their staff. But the ordinary citizen in D.C. does not have that protection.
Isn't that a sad reality that you can't even wear your pin because so many people are fearful of the violence that we're seeing both verbally and physically? Last question, Congressman, before I let you go. The president wants to deploy 500 more National Guard troops to D.C. You said you like seeing them on the street. It makes a lot of people feel safer, including you. But do you think that'll help prevent other situations like this, or will it add to the tension?
I think the more visibility, the better at this point. I think President Trump is going to send a strong message, along with the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, that we are not going to take this. If it's political violence, I think that's even worse. If it's Islamic terrorism, whatever the case may be, we've got to make sure that people know that we are not giving up Washington, D.C.
Congressman Mark Alford, I don't even feel right wishing you a happy Thanksgiving after everything that happened tonight, but I do appreciate your time and, of course, your analysis on this.
Well, we have a lot to be thankful for. A God who loves us, the greatest country known to man. We're here because of the providence and protection of God Almighty.
All right. Thank you so much, Congressman. After the break, we'll go back live on the scene with NewsNation correspondent Kelly Meyer. Again, a lot of new details coming in this hour. We'll keep you updated. Don't go too far.
This doctor says he has found a way to kill cancer.
It is the only cell that's within us that's never been unlocked.
Chris Cuomo on a breakthrough that will astound you. Tomorrow, 9/8 Central, only on NewsNation.
We have updates coming into the newsroom on the latest breaking news we've been covering, being the ambush shooting that left 2 West Virginia National Guardsmen in critical condition in Washington, D.C. this afternoon. Senior law enforcement officials confirmed to NewsNation that the suspect in the shooting is an Afghan national. We also have learned he used a handgun. The alleged gunman is in custody at a local D.C. hospital where he is being treated after he was shot following his alleged targeted shooting of those guardsmen. Police say the gunman took aim on both of them as they were high visibility patrol near the entrance to the Farragut West Metro Station, a very busy and typically safe area in our nation's capital. FBI Director Kash Patel says the suspect will be charged with assault on a federal officer. NewsNation correspondent Kelly Meyer is live on the scene. She's been there since this started a few hours ago. Kelly, what are you learning?
Yeah, and you mentioned the Farragut West stop, Hena, and that is just behind me here. We are on the corner of 18th and I. This happened on 17th and I. I was just 2 blocks over from that when this happened, essentially. I saw the cars, the U.S. Secret Service cars, D.C. police cars rushing to the scene, and I was really locked in place. I remember U.S. Secret Service at that moment. I asked, is everything okay? What's going on? And they said, I can't say anything right now. You'll hear it soon. And I said, are we safe? And they said yes. So this was a lockdown around the White House for several hours. You could obviously still see the police activity behind me. Completely caught off guard, those 2 National Guardsmen. And we are learning now, per U.S. officials and senior law enforcement officials, that that suspect is an Afghan national. We are waiting to hear more about the suspect. A lot of details still need to be learned, but we do know the 2 National Guardsmen are in critical condition and being treated tonight. These guardsmen were here, sent by the president. Remember, back in August, he mobilized the National Guard to Washington, D.C. as he was pitching to clean up the city and keep it safe. And these National Guardsmen were just outside of that metro stop. This happened, as you mentioned, 2:15 in the afternoon, the day before Thanksgiving. I will mention, too, when I was outside just a few blocks away, there were a lot of families walking by at that moment. There's a lot of people in town visiting the White House. We were just 2 blocks from the White House. A lot of people were in town coming to see that. So this was a shock and shook everybody, and a lot of people around me. I remember people in that moment thinking back, they didn't know what was going on either, and a lot of people were scared at that moment. So we are still waiting at this hour for more details to come about, but we certainly are hearing that the suspect is an Afghan national, that those 2 guardsmen are in critical condition, and that this was a targeted attack. Hena.
It's just so sad. Kelly Meyer, thank you. I want to bring in retired NYPD Lieutenant Commander Joe Cardinale. Also joining us is former FBI agent and former prosecutor Catherine Schweit. Thanks to both of you for being here. Lieutenant, I will start with you with the recent news that we just got from Kelly that this was an Afghan national. Your response?
Well, that puts a rhyme or reason as to why the FBI director was using plural. You know, they're looking at things that we do not know about right now, nor should we know about them right now. They are digging into the past of an individual that has ties, possibly has ties to an organization that's widespread. So, you know, it's not uncommon to do that. I think it's important that they address every issue that they know behind the scenes right now before coming out with any other statements, because there might be a much larger picture to this than we realize.
And Catherine, I want to pose the same question to you. Again, this just came into the newsroom a little while ago. He's an Afghan national. We have a little bit more clarification on the weapon he used. It's a handgun. Your response?
Yeah, handguns are easy to move, and most targeted violence is handgun oriented, despite kind of what we think about as somebody using a semi-automatic rifle. Most are semi-automatic handguns. And also with regard to the individual and his nationality or whatever that particular situation is, I think we all agree that the facts will lead us to what will tell us whether this is going to be a international terrorism charge, because we can connect it to some international group that might want to do something specifically, or if this is an individual who was inspired or chose to do something because they had a particular bent and a grievance that really has nothing to do necessarily with any other type of terrorist group or their country of their native country. So I think it's important, obviously, to be patient, let the facts come together, which we know law enforcement, both federal, state, local, will do.
Lieutenant, walk us through the first steps investigators take when two uniformed National Guardsmen are shot in a dense metro area like D.C. What happens first?
Well, you establish, that's a crime scene. You establish your perimeters, and they had the shooter, and you start working. You have many components at the same time. Naturally, it's to get, the safety of the public. That's why they lock down the White House and everything else, because you're dealing with the unknown at that point. But you do have a shooter, and how they got his identification could be that they got prints off of him immediately. I heard it said before, I'm not sure, that he did not have any identification on him. So, they would do the facial recognition and do it that way. But you're also tracing the weapon. You're tracing this individual. You have a slew of investigators on this individual from every aspect that you can imagine, internationally as well. So, that being said, they're still securing that area, making sure that that area is going to be the crime scene. They're going to be going over those video cameras to see all the surveillance cameras to see if this individual came that route before, if he was there earlier that day, earlier that week. And they'll tie that in with facial recognition as well.
Catherine, this is being described as a targeted ambush-style shooting. Again, these troops are deployed to strengthen security in the Capitol. How does a gunman get close enough to shoot them in this way in broad daylight?
Oh, any law enforcement officer would tell you that if a gunman's willing to die, he can step right up to you and kill you. So law enforcement is aware of that, and I can tell you as a person who works pretty exclusively in this area and targeted violence for law enforcement and for the United States as a whole, that targeted violence for law enforcement has been on the increase over the last 15 years. Probably my figures say maybe 1 in 7 incidents of targeted violence includes a specific act against a law enforcement officer or first responder. So law enforcement's aware of this and concerned about it, but they have to do their job. And as we know, law enforcement is tough and they find a way to do that job. But they recognize that even when they're called to a scene, they could be being called to an ambush scene.
Joe Cardinale, Catherine Schweit, really hate having this discussion the night before Thanksgiving, really any time, but this is just so heartbreaking. Thank you both, and happy Thanksgiving, guys.
Same to you, Hannah.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, Batya Ungar-Sargon's take on what we saw today. Don't go too far. We'll be right back. We are going back to that breaking news of 2 National Guardsmen shot in broad daylight in Washington, D.C. earlier today. Joining me now is NewsNation host Batya Ungar-Sargon. She is also hosting On Balance tonight here on NewsNation, 9 p.m. Eastern. Batya, thanks for coming on. This is such a difficult story to cover. We don't know the motive yet. You report on this a lot, the political tensions rising in our country. What was your first reaction when you heard the news?
Well, of course, the horror of it all. On Thanksgiving Eve, 2 people who were effectively protecting American lives gunned down. I mean, just horrific. And of course, I'm sure we're all joined as Americans in praying for them. I think you started to see very quickly some people on the right try to use this tragedy as a cudgel against those 6 Democratic officials and who had made that video suggesting that people in uniform not obey illegal orders. But it became very clear that this was not what was happening here. A photo started to circulate very early on, and now we have it confirmed that this gentleman, the alleged shooter, is actually an Afghan national. And so I really just don't see this person as, taking his marching orders from Democratic officials. And it's so tragic, but at least we don't have to add to the tragedy the fact that one of our fellow Americans did something this heinous. And to me, there's a small comfort in that, I have to say.
I want to go back to what you said about the finger pointing initially when we heard about this crime. How would you describe the overall climate right now, even now knowing that it was an Afghan national and not an American citizen?
I think it's very hard because in moments like this, just like after Charlie Kirk's horrific assassination, people get very, very angry. It is infuriating that this happened. And if this person was allowed to come in, as we now know in 2021, if he wasn't vetted properly enough, we should be infuriated that our rights as Americans to walk safely on our streets are being infringed by this kind of refusal to abide by the laws of this nation. And I think that really, unfortunately, sometimes people use that anger in order to find their chosen political enemy and blame them, even in a situation like this, where, like we said, it doesn't seem to really fit the narrative from what we know right now.
I spoke to Republican Congressman Mark Alford just a little while ago, and he called for unity and healing. But how do we get past the reflex, the impulse to blame other people, other parties?
It's a really good question, especially on the eve of Thanksgiving when people go home and see family members that they maybe don't necessarily agree with. I'm very honored to be here on this station where we so much believe that more unites us than divides us as Americans. And I think that's really the key, is to focus on that fact all the time. It doesn't mean we can't have disagreements. Those disagreements are crucial and they are central to what makes us Americans. We have to always find that common ground at the end of the day.
Batya, stay right there. I believe our Kelly Meyer has more breaking news about the attack on the National Guardsman. Kelly, what are you learning?
Yeah, hey there, Hena and Batya. We are learning from U.S. officials, as our sources here, that the FBI will initially investigate this shooting of 2 members of the National Guard here in D.C. happened behind me here as a possible act of terrorism. We are learning that from U.S. officials into our newsroom just moments ago. That is in addition to what we were learning that U.S. officials confirmed to NewsNation that the shooter is an Afghan national. So these are the latest developments we're hearing as we're beginning to learn more tonight about the suspect, about the shooter in this incident that happened just behind me here this afternoon here in Washington, D.C. Those 2 National Guardsmen shot here in D.C. They are in critical condition in the hospital tonight, and learning those details now about the shooter, the suspect in this. So we will continue to update you, but that is the latest, that they are investigating this as a possible act of terror. Now, they have said, and they said earlier at the press conference, that they won't rule out other possibilities if that is where the investigation takes them. So we'll continue to watch this for you, Hena and Batya.
All right, Kelly Meyer, thank you so much. Live on the scene in Washington, D.C. Batya, so again, in the last hour, we've confirmed that the suspect is an Afghan national. He used a handgun, allegedly. And as Kelly just reported, the charge was an assault on a federal officer. Now it may escalate to act of terrorism. What are your thoughts as you look at this fluid story evolving so quickly?
It's very interesting. I did also read that it was reported that he's not cooperating with law enforcement, which I think makes all of this even more complicated, right? How do you figure out what that motive was, which of course is going to be what the FBI primarily is going to be focused on, and we'll be very curious to see what they come up with.
Does the fact that the victims were National Guard members in uniform elevate this case?
I think absolutely, especially at a time when there is a lot of politicization of law enforcement in our country. These people are heroes. They put their lives on the line protecting us, making sure that we as Americans have our rights protected all the time, that we're safe and secure. What the president did when he initially sent those National Guardsmen into D.C., it started out being very divisive, but ended up being very unifying. I mean, Mayor Bowser came out in support of it. She thanked the president for it. You talk to people in D.C., they're so grateful that crime has gone down. They're so grateful to feel that presence, that deterrence. So to see those very people who are protecting Americans be gunned down, it is horrifying and it is infuriating.
Do you think we're seeing a shift in people who are being targeted in our country?
What do you mean?
As you know, we saw Charlie Kirk, we saw the assassination attempt on President Trump, and now 2 guardsmen. I mean, these are brazen acts of violence.
I know that I personally am doing everything I can to make sure that when I am speaking about people that I think are doing the wrong thing, I'm taking the temperature down, even as we have to do that as Americans. We have to express ourselves, but we have to be careful about how we speak.
Absolutely. Batya and Gar-Sargon, I'll see you tonight on Balance. Thank you. And we have a lot more breaking news about the attack on National Guardsmen in Washington, D.C. We will take a quick break. We will be right back. Jesse Weber joining me now. Jesse, you'll be covering the breaking news. 2 National Guardsmen shot, critically injured in D.C. The mayor of D.C. says it was a targeted shooting. NewsNation just confirmed that the suspect is an Afghan national. The FBI preliminarily investigating this as an act of terrorism, not ruling out other possibilities if that's where the investigation takes them. I've been saying this the last hour. This is a fluid investigation. Our Kelly Myers on the scene. I know you'll be talking to a lot of guests tonight.
Yeah, and we're learning a few more details. And I think what you did incredibly well this past hour, as it was breaking news, and what we want to do in the next hour as well, this is already going to be politicized. It's already becoming politicized like it is with any major shooting. Right. But I will tell you there are some key details that we are learning about this that we want to make clear about maybe the why, maybe the motive. It's being reported that this person is uncooperative at this point. So I think it's going to be very important that we sort through this misinformation that may leak, that may come out during the course of this, because it's really an unbelievable situation when you think about it. 2 armed National Guard members on the eve of Thanksgiving.
In broad daylight, in a busy area.
And by the way, Kelly Meyer, just blocks away.
Right.
Blocks away.
2 blocks away at the White House.
And
put in lockdown, by the way.
Yeah, and look, it's going to come to it. You know this is going to be the conversation. Well, what does this say about crime in D.C.? Do we need more National Guard members there? Do we need less? Were they put in harm's way? So that conversation is going to continue. But right now, and this is very critical in any investigation, any crime, understanding what happened, getting that information, because the crime scene is fresh right now, and hopefully investigators get a chance with the help of FBI to see what happened.
And you know this very well. Outdoor crime scenes are very hard to control, and of course the contamination aspect of it.
Heavily populated area,
Right.
so we got to see what happens. But Hena, thank you so much.
Always great to see you, my friend. That does it tonight. Elizabeth Vargas will be back Monday, I believe. Right now, it's time for Cuomo.